The moment my sister lifted the microphone, I knew she wasn't about to thank me. People like Alara never thanked. They displayed. The ballroom inside the coastal estate shimmered under vaulted glass ceilings, light refracting off crystal pendants like 1,000 judgmental eyes. Everything smelled expensive. Orchids flown in from somewhere tropical, polished wood, money that had never known panic. I was seated exactly where I belonged, according to my family. Not near the front, not even in the room. Please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you never miss a moment like this. Your like and share can carry this story to someone who needs hope, healing, or strength today. Red heart. My place card said Table 23. Table 23 was not a table so much as a compromise. A small circular setup tucked near a side corridor, close enough to hear the applause, far enough to avoid being seen in photographs. A structural afterthought. I sat there with my son, Noah, age 8, his feet not quite touching the floor. He swung them nervously, smoothing the sleeves of the blazer I'd borrowed from a neighbor's kid, and altered myself with a cheap sewing kit. "Mom," he whispered, leaning closer. "Is Aunt Alara mad at us?" I tightened my grip on his hand. "No," I said. "She's just busy erasing me." Alara stood at the head table glowing in white satin, every curl deliberate, every smile engineered. My mother, Diane, sat beside her, pearls pressed tight against her throat like armor. And then Alara began. "I just want to say," she said brightly, tilting her head, "that family means everything to me." A ripple of approving murmurs moved through the crowd. She paused. "I mean, we don't all start from the same place." The room chuckled. Her eyes found me instantly. Not by accident. Never by accident. "My sister Marin," she continued, voice sweet enough to rot teeth, "has had a complicated life." A laugh. Softer this time. "She's always been resourceful. Creative. Especially when it comes to using what's available." The words landed wrong. "Sideways." Diane leaned toward her table mates and added, not quietly, "Some people survive by leaning, others by taking." Laughter spread. Real laughter now. Noah's fingers curled into my sleeve. "Why are they laughing?" he asked. I couldn't answer him. Alara smiled wider, emboldened. "Marin's been enrolled in more programs than I can count. Grants, courses, aid packages. She really knows how to work the system." She lifted her glass. A survivor, if nothing else. The applause came automatically. Thoughtless. Cruel. I felt the old instinct kick in, the urge to shrink, to fold myself smaller, to accept my role as contrast so she could shine brighter. I pushed my chair back slightly, just enough. We could leave quietly. We always did. But before I could stand, my mother spoke again, sharper this time. "She's always been like that," Diane said, "borrowing names, borrowing chances. Some people don't build lives, they occupy them." Something inside my chest cracked. Noah looked up at me, confusion clouding his face. "Mom, what does that mean?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Then a sound cut through the room. A chair, dragged back, slow, deliberate. The groom, Callum, stood. He didn't look at Alara, didn't look at Diane. He looked straight at me. The room froze. He took the microphone from Alara's hand, not violently, not gently, just decisively, like reclaiming something misplaced. "I think," he said calmly, "we need to pause." The chandeliers hummed. Someone dropped a fork. Alara laughed nervously. "Babe, it's just a joke." Callum didn't smile. "No," he said, "it isn't." 2 hours earlier, I had arrived at the estate already bracing for impact. The invitation had come late, 3 weeks before the wedding. No +1, no seat assignment listed. I'd almost declined, but Noah had been excited. "She's still my aunt," He'd said, "Right." I told myself it was one day, one afternoon of endurance. I'd survived worse. Standing in the marble foyer that afternoon, I'd watched staff adjust floral installations worth more than my annual rent. I did the math automatically. I always did. The wedding cost somewhere near $180,000. 3 months earlier, I'd been fighting a different number, $9,460. That was the balance I owed after discovering my identity had been used quietly, efficiently to enroll in 2 professional certification programs I had never attended. Programs billed under my name. Loans approved using my social security number. When I'd confronted my mother, she'd sighed. Ilera was just trying to help herself get ahead. She'd said, "You weren't using your credit anyway." I was still paying it off. Standing there now, watching champagne flow like water, I realized something cold and clarifying. They hadn't just humiliated me for sport. They'd built themselves by standing on my paperwork. Back in the ballroom, Callum's voice carried evenly. "For the past year," he said, "I've heard a story about Marin." Ilera's smile faltered. A story about how she used her sister's generosity, about how Ilera supported her, covered her debts, helped her survive. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a folder. "That story," he continued, "is false." A murmur swept the room. I felt my stomach drop. Callum turned slightly, addressing the guests now. "I discovered this 6 months ago. Documents, enrollment records, digital signatures." He looked at Ilera. "You used your sister's identity to register for certification programs. You defaulted. The financial liability followed her." Gasps. Ilera's face drained of color. "I paid off part of that debt," Callum said, "because I believed the lie. I believed I was helping a struggling woman." He swallowed. "I was actually cleaning up fraud." Silence crushed the room. I couldn't breathe. Diane stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate." "No," Callum said, finally raising his voice just enough. "What's inappropriate is mocking the person you exploited." He turned toward me. "Marin," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." Something inside me steadied. For the first time, the room wasn't laughing. It was listening, and Ilera's stage was collapsing. The room felt heavy with disbelief. Ilera's rehearsed posture had collapsed like a paper tower in a rainstorm. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Diane's hand trembled as she clutched a napkin, trying to staunch the flood of embarrassment that had no remedy. Noah tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, what's happening?" I gave him a small, steadying squeeze. "They're finally telling the truth. Honey." Truth. That word had been rare in our house. Rare and sharp. Callum turned to the crowd again. The balance Marin owed for those fraudulent enrollments was $9,460. He said, "I cleared it myself, anonymously." She didn't ask. She didn't know. And she didn't take a single penny of your pity or applause. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if trying to make sense of the carefully curated spectacle they had been watching. They had believed Ilera's narrative for months, maybe years. "You see," Callum continued, "it's easy to tell a story where someone else looks helpless. But the reality is that Marin had been navigating a storm I couldn't imagine. She wasn't relying on anyone's charity. She was surviving on sheer grit." I swallowed, feeling my throat tighten, not from shame, not from pride, but from the surreal weight of witnessing vindication in real time. I had practiced this moment in my head countless times, usually in silence, alone at my kitchen table, imagining myself stepping out of the shadows. But now it was here, alive and tangible. Ilera's hands trembled. "Callum, that's not fair." Not fair." He interrupted, Voice even, not loud but sharp enough to slice through the tension. Not fair as laughing at your sister in front of hundreds of people while using her identity to advance your own career. Not fair as pretending that someone else's struggle is your triumph. The crowd shifted again, murmurs starting like water creeping into a basement. Somewhere near the head table, a fork clinked onto china. The sound felt thunderous. Diane's face contorted. "Callum, you don't understand." She was only trying to help herself. Callum shook his head slowly, turning back to me. "Marin, you didn't ask me to do this, did you?" "No," I whispered, voice calm. "Solid." "I didn't." He nodded. "Good. Because the only reason you needed help was because someone else had weaponized your life against you." I looked at Noah. His face was pale, eyes wide. "Mom, are we okay now?" I smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes, honey, we're okay now." The room had descended into chaos. Guests whispered, some in shock, others in disbelief. Phones were out, capturing reactions, creating a digital record that could never be fully erased. Ilara's carefully crafted image, as the saintly, capable sister who helped the struggling sibling, was imploding before everyone's eyes. She tried to recover. I didn't mean for it to." "You meant every word," Callum said, voice low. "Every exploitative, manipulative, calculated word. And now, the record is clear." I could see Diane's panic. She tried to step forward, to intervene, to salvage the narrative, but I was done. I no longer needed anyone to save me, to defend me, or to validate me. I simply didn't care what they thought. Their shame wasn't mine to carry. Callum gestured toward the folder he had placed on the table. The receipts, bank transfers, copies of enrollment forms, all proof that the system had been manipulated and that I had been the silent victim fighting invisibly to maintain my integrity. Guests edged closer, peeking at the folder. The murmurs grew louder. "She lied." One woman whispered, "All this time." Another, older man, shook his head slowly. "I can't believe it, the documentation. That's $9,460 she didn't owe." It wasn't the money that mattered anymore. That number was trivial compared to the years of ridicule, the whispered insults, the deliberate sidelining at family events. The money was symbolic. The money was validation that someone had finally seen the truth. Ilara's face twisted. "You're ruining this. My wedding, my day." Callum's expression softened. Not pity, not forgiveness, just clarity. "Your day was never about you. It was about performance. And now, the performance has ended." Diane tried one last thing. She grabbed my arm, nails pressing through the fabric of my dress. "Marin, tell him it's not true. Tell him I paid. Tell him she owes nothing." I peeled her fingers off gently. "No." My voice was calm, deliberate. "It's too late for lies, Mom. It's time to acknowledge the truth." She recoiled like I had struck her. Her eyes were wild, darting between the guests, Callum, and the collapsing figure of Ilara. Noah, sitting beside me, whispered, "Mom, are they going to hurt us?" I shook my head. "No, honey, we're leaving this behind. Everything else is theirs to deal with." The rest of the evening became a blur. Guests lingered awkwardly, unsure whether to console Ilara, congratulate Callum, or stare at me like I was suddenly a threat or an anomaly. But Noah and I didn't linger. We left table 23 behind. The corridor felt like freedom, narrow but private, a tunnel to escape the performance stage that had been constructed over my life. Outside, the coastal air was cooler, salt-laden, and sharp. We inhaled it deeply. The mansion behind us glimmered in fading sunlight, a gilded cage, now silent. Callum followed briefly, catching up at the driveway. He handed me a small envelope. "Just for transparency," He said softly, "All the records. Copies for you to keep." I nodded, clutching it without opening. My life didn't need his permission or his records to feel real. It had always been real. I had survived on nothing but grit, and the scraps life had left me. Later that night, when we reached our modest apartment, I opened the envelope. Sure enough, bank records, enrollment forms, transaction statements. Everything validated what had just occurred. For the first time, the weight of a family's lies and manipulations didn't sit on my chest. The numbers no longer mattered. They were proof that I had been right to trust my instincts, right to fight quietly, and right to survive with my dignity intact. And I had survived. The next morning, the apartment smelled faintly of salt air and old coffee. Noah was curled on the couch, still half asleep, his little fingers clutching the blanket I had sewn from scraps of fabric collected over years. I sat at the kitchen table, with the envelope Callum had given me. I went through it slowly, deliberately. Bank statements, enrollment records, emails, screenshots of digital signatures forged in my name. Every document was a breadcrumb tracing the path of their deceit. Every number, every date was a confirmation that I hadn't been careless. I had been a victim of calculation and greed, but I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. The first step in reclaiming my life was quiet but precise. I contacted the financial institutions that had issued the fraudulent course loans. Each phone call, each email was a small act of reclamation. I wasn't just clearing my name, I was reclaiming control. Every representative I spoke to confirmed what I already knew. The applications had been forged, and I had been listed as the responsible party without consent. Within 3 weeks, all the fraudulent accounts were closed, and the balances formally marked as resolved. The total came to $9,460, a number I had carried like a stone in my chest for months. I didn't celebrate with champagne or fanfare. I celebrated by breathing freely. For the first time in years, I wasn't under the shadow of someone else's narrative. Next, I turned my attention to rebuilding. The old business plan I had shelved years ago was still on my laptop, dusty but intact. I updated the spreadsheets, moved allocations from debt repayment to equipment investment, and made the first purchase, a commercial-grade 3D printer. I registered my LLC under my own name, something I had been too fearful to do while Diane and Alara had their claws in my identity. Every click, every keystroke, every signature was a quiet rebellion. I wasn't seeking revenge in the traditional sense. No lawsuits, no public humiliation. My revenge was existence. My revenge was claiming life on my own terms. Noah watched me work, his comic book momentarily forgotten. "Mom, are we going to be okay now?" he asked. "Yes, honey," I said, smiling genuinely. "We're more than okay. We're going to be better than okay." Over the next few months, I built slowly. I took on freelance work in digital design, creating custom installations for local businesses. Every contract I completed, every satisfied client, was a reminder that skill, integrity, and perseverance could outshine deceit and privilege. And while Diane and Alara continued their performances, Alara on social media as the ever-generous sister, Diane attending country club luncheons, my life was private, grounded, and entirely mine. It wasn't glamorous. There were no chandeliers, no silk tablecloths, no curated applause. There was only the smell of sawdust and fresh paint, the hum of a 3D printer, and Noah's laughter echoing through our small apartment. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from Callum. I hadn't expected contact. We hadn't spoken since the wedding, and I didn't need to, but curiosity opened the message. "Marin," it read, "I wanted you to know that everything with the fraudulent accounts has been formally rectified in my records as well. No one else will ever mistake you for the culprit. I've been following your projects quietly, and I'm impressed by what you've built from nothing. That's rare. He signed simply, Callum. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. There was no romantic undercurrent, no call to drama or spectacle, just acknowledgement, respect, and recognition. It was enough. It was more than I had ever expected from them. Weeks later, I was kneeling in the soil of a small community garden I had designed for a local women's shelter. It was a public project, but it felt intimate, tangible, real. I guided volunteers, planted saplings, and measured rows of flowers with precise care. Noah ran between patches of marigolds and lavender, laughing, carefree, alive. In that moment, I realized something fundamental. My life wasn't about them. It hadn't been for decades. The humiliation, the sidelining, the stolen identity, those were events, not definitions. I wasn't a footnote in their narrative. I was the author of my own story. Alara's social media accounts became a background noise I didn't follow. Diane stopped calling. Their attempts to reassert themselves were impotent. I had built defenses they couldn't breach, a life that required no validation from anyone who had once exploited me. Months turned into seasons. The small business flourished quietly. The garden thrived. Noah learned to plant, to measure, to respect the earth. He didn't need a silver spoon. He needed roots, and I was giving them to him. One evening, after the volunteers had left and the garden gates were locked, I sat on a bench beside Noah. He held a small, hand-painted sign that read, "We made this." He looked at me with a wide grin. "Mom, we did it," he said. "Yes, buddy," I replied. "We really did." I realized then what revenge had truly meant. It wasn't confrontation or exposure or even the clearing of debts. It was reclaiming life, quietly, deliberately, one small, significant step at a time. It was showing myself and Noah that we weren't defined by the cruelty of others. We weren't diminished by their greed or performance. We were resilient, capable, alive. I dug my fingers into the earth around a sapling, feeling the roots grip the soil. Sometimes, I whispered to Noah, the people who are supposed to protect you will let you down. Sometimes they'll take from you. But nothing can steal who you are if you refuse to let them. You take it back, quietly, piece by piece, and you build something real. He nodded solemnly, understanding more than his 8 years could articulate. And that became my moral, my personal truth. Life doesn't reward the loudest performance or the prettiest lies. It rewards endurance, integrity, and the courage to claim what is yours quietly, without apology, without spectacle. I stood, brushing soil from my hands, and looked at the small garden we had nurtured together. I saw the vibrant colors, the strong roots, and the life thriving where attention and patience had been applied. I saw Noah laughing as he raced along the paths. And I saw myself, not as the used product my family had branded me, but as a mother, a survivor, and an architect of my own existence. For the first time in decades, I was free. And in that freedom, I found something better than revenge, a life that belonged entirely to us.